The Elixir of Life for Genghis Khan. In the year of the fall of Otrar, the Taoist monk Chang-chun, enlightened and engaged in many mysteries, received an invitation, even a request, from a man whose name terrified half the world. I wear the same clothes and eat the same food as the shepherds and herders. I take care of the people as if they were a newborn child, and I take care of the soldiers as if they were my brothers. Show me your mercy and tell me of the means to preserve life. Genghis Khan. To show that mercy and fulfill the request, the monk would have to travel a long way from North China to Afghanistan and India, where Genghis Khan was situated at that time. But the enlightened Taoist took a different path. How did this come about? And did he share the miracle cure? This is a journey to trace the hidden paths of the immortal and learn the secret of eternal life. Charlatan or spiritual teacher? Broadly speaking, he built a monastery in which he spent the last days of his life. Foresight or simply an accident? Genghis Khan wanted to know the secrets of immortality, which of course was of interest to everyone. Secrets of alchemy or a hoax? The transmission of this information was largely punishable by the higher powers in the heavens. A mysterious meeting between the almighty conqueror and one of the immortals. How to obtain a formula for eternal life and die within a year. The great step. The elixir of life for Genghis Khan. Chapter 1. An enlightened elder. A Buddhist temple in Urumqi. How many times the bell should be struck depends upon your wishes. If you strike 5 times, you are bound to be happy with everything. Strike 6 and your career will go uphill. 10 and you're forever young and beautiful. Well, in order to find harmony with yourself and the world around you, you need to hit only once. Harmony with oneself and with the whole world does not, of course, concern Genghis Khan. By the early 1220s, his troops occupied part of China. And here he first heard about the mysterious magician that knew the secret of eternal life. Genghis Khan was over 60 at that time, and the approach of feeble old age understandably worried him. It was his healer and arrow grinder who first told Genghis Khan about the enlightened philosopher. He said that there was a sage who had lived for 300 years, and then the advisor to the Khan, Yelu Jutsai, related the same story to the ruler. He deeply regretted this sometime later. Genghis Khan invited not only him, but also Nestorian priests. In general, he wanted to learn the secrets of immortality, which of course was of interest to everyone. Chang-chun was a Taoist monk aged over 70, and one of the so-called 7 immortals. He called himself a mountain savage. He lived in a cave for a long time. He was a poet, magician, alchemist, and author of the treatise Direct Indications of the Great Elixir. In China, there were 2 directions: the chemical method of obtaining eternal life, and the one based on energy. Internal alchemy is when you keep your body in a healthy state by maintaining a balance between all the chemical and thermal processes occurring in the body. The alchemist did not want to visit Genghis Khan. He tried to excuse himself by saying that he was not young and that he needed solitude, but they sent him a special escort. The monk travelled on a so-called carriage of peace, that being the custom for honourable people in China. The escort consisted of 19 students, Mongol dignitaries, and 100 horsemen. It was, in fact, a convoy. This monk was here, in Urumqi. As he was passing through, he was greeted with honour, since everyone knew that he was going to the great Khan. Its exact route is unclear because the monk and the convoy did not follow a straight path. His student kept notes. Many influential Mongols wanted to know the secret of immortality. The first to show an interest was Genghis Khan's younger brother. The journey even took him to Mongolia. Several thousand black carts and felt yurts stood in rows. The teacher introduced himself to the prince, who asked him about ways to prolong life. The teacher replied that it was necessary to fast in advance. Chang-chun, journey to the west. And he appointed a time for the transfer of the secret knowledge. But that very day, it suddenly started to snow. A bad omen, said Chang-chun, and reasoned that one could not reveal the secrets that were intended for the great Khagan. And so the secret was kept. In the meantime, Genghis Khan had deployed himself elsewhere. He was already in Central Asia. He strove to create a huge world power. Naturally, he needed the territories of Kazakhstan, so his gaze was directed here. Yet again, the route had to be adjusted. After many stopovers and several weeks of travel, an identifiable geographical place, Altai, appears in the diary. The servant said that a werewolf had grabbed him by the hair in these mountains. It was said that the Naiman sovereign was also attacked here by a mountain werewolf. The teacher offered no reply to this. Chang-chun, journey to the west. Instead, he composed 3 poems about communing with nature, whilst his disciples, fleeing from demons, smeared the heads of their horses with dog's blood, saying that this was the only thing that would frighten werewolves. And so they came to another recognizable place called Tian Shan. These majestic mountains were shrouded in peace and quiet. Other waypoints were not easy to identify. What cities and lands did Chang-chun visit? Did he write the truth about his trip? Did he mention Almaty? Chapter 2. A Geographical Quest. Here they mainly ride on donkeys. Sometimes they harness not only one donkey in a cart, but 2 or even 3. Such a trio of donkeys can be seen racing through the streets of Jarkent. Chang-chun called the local races long-eared. This was a common means of transportation here in the 13th century. One of the locals, Uyghur, treated us to dinner. His wife regaled us with grape wine. They brought watermelons which weighed a ton. Melons that were as big as a pillow. Chang-chun, journey to the west. It is not easy to identify the route and place names mentioned by the monk. It's only guesswork, but could it perhaps be the area where Jarkent is now found? At that time, the route of the Great Silk Road passed through Korgoz or via the Jungar Gate and on to the Ili Valley. There was a crossing in the Kapchagai region which went to Bishkek, through Almaty, then to Shymkent and further into Central Asia. We arrived in the city of Alima. The owner of the city, together with the Mongol governor, came out to meet us. We stopped in a garden. The natives call the fruit Alima, and since there are many such fruit here, they called the city by that name. Chang-chun, journey to the west. These fruits were, of course, apples. But what is this city? We know 2 names, which are Al-Malik in the People's Republic of China, in fact on the border with Kazakhstan, and the second one is Al-Mali or Almaty in the Mongolian version of this word. This city existed within the boundaries of the so-called Greater Almaty. There are stones piled along the banks of the rivers and across the roads. Neither wheels nor horses can pass here. Rising and descending in 2 carts, we suffered from tremors. 100 horsemen walked in front of us and behind. The sea called Heavenly Lake was on the top of the mountain. Chang-chun, journey to the west. It's only a guess, but the heavenly lake could possibly be Istiqlal, or the Great Almaty Lake. Some other descriptions also correspond to local landscapes. Here are more lines from the diary. Farmers irrigate the fields with water pipes. Aren't these pipes kept in the Almaty Museum? These are 18-meter water pipes found near Almaty. Glorifying the harsh grandeur of the mountains, they moved on. 4 days later, we arrived at Talas. Having crossed the river by boat, we came to a large mountain where there is a small town. There are many plains here. Locals are engaged in agriculture and silkworm breeding. Wine is made from grapes. Chang-chun, journey to the west. The small town was probably Taras. Since ancient times, it has been famous for both winemaking and silkworm breeding. Here is a different description, quote, "We came across a stone settlement of red color. Burial mounds are located like stars in the Big Dipper." Part of his notes are directly related to the history of Akitaz. Such a powerful structure has an unconventional layout for a caravanserai. Unusually for settlements and cities in Kazakhstan, it was built of red stone. One way or another, somewhere in these places, a courier was sent to Genghis Khan with the message, "Stand by, we are on our way." What did the Taoists speak with Genghis Khan about? What happened in Shymkent? And what did the immortal monk achieve? Chapter 3. By the will of the great sky. We traversed the stone bridge and made 5 crossings to the city of Sairam. There is a small tower here. The Turkestan prince led us into the courtyard. Chang-chun, journey to the west. The city was going through difficulties at that time. There were many deaths in Sairam at that time. There was a lot of blood. Many animals were killed. Trading stopped. Most of the markets were destroyed. Strangely, not a word about this was mentioned in the accounts. Meanwhile, in Sairam, a disaster struck Chang-chun's retinue. One of his disciples fell ill and died a few days later. They buried him on a hill, and the monk pressed on. Obviously, he was the one walking towards Shymkent after all. Back then, it was a suburb of Sairam. It was said that in these places, a certain alchemist was hiding who supposedly also knew the secret of immortality. He miraculously escaped from Otrar when it was destroyed. Chang-chun came to him, accompanied only by his disciples. But the local magician revealed nothing to the man who was on his way to Genghis Khan. Legend has it that Mongol warriors killed his family. But Chang-chun wrote nothing of Shymkent. His notes, however, mention that messengers from the Khan had arrived near Sairam with a message. Holy gentlemen, you came from the land of the rising sun, made your way with difficulty through mountains and valleys. Now I am returning and longing to hear the interpretation of the Tao. Be not idle to meet me. Genghis Khan. He wasn't idle. He spent the winter in Samarkand while Genghis Khan was dealing with his military affairs. Then they finally met. The Khan said something along the lines of, "Many emperors offered invitations, you rejected these, but you came to me." To which Chang-chun responded, "Your will is the will of the great heaven." When he invited him to his location, Genghis Khan asked him if there was a cure for death. He replied that it was impossible to live forever, but that there was an opportunity to prolong life. It is unlikely that the great and terrible ruler was pleased with the answer, although he praised him for his frankness. It seems that having learned that the bottle of elixir did not exist, Genghis Khan lost some interest in the monk. But he allowed him his life, and for some reason had him remain. He ordered 2 yurts to be raised for the guest near to his own. Such was Genghis Khan's decision. Better not to kill a good person, but to keep them around. Here he is, a man of history, who led a very reasonable human resource policy. The monk, with unheard of insolence, refused to dine with the Khagan and drink kumis from his hands, and there were no reprisals. The Khan bit the bullet. He would come and go. Now and again he would demand that the monk go on campaigns with him, and then he personally escorted the immortal Taoist to the region around Shymkent. An interesting fact, Chang-chun advised the Khan not to get involved in hunting, as though he had seen it in a crystal ball. Everything happened somewhere in the vicinity. The Khan shot at a big boar. His horse stumbled and he fell. The boar stopped, not daring to approach. Upon learning of this, the teacher said, "The fall is a sign from heaven, and the fact that the boar did not dare to move is a sign of the protection of heaven." Chang-chun, Journey to the West. The Khan promised to follow the advice and did not hunt once for 2 months. The monk yearned for home, but the Khagan would not release him. The Khan said he had to wait for his sons so that they might also hear his words. So they waited. Chang-chun gave a kind of workshop on how to extend the earthly days. Some of what he said was about the need to eat wisely, be in harmony with oneself, not to give in to excess, and learn to breathe correctly. He simply explained to him that you need to nurture your spirit in order to leave the body, and that this was immortality. But Genghis Khan was an ambitious person. When he heard that immortality lies in the fact that his spirit must leave, along with his consciousness, well, he probably realized that he'd like to live on for longer. It was April 1223, somewhere in these lands. The conqueror finally decided to let the monk go. The monk rejoiced at the news. Not only that, but the Khan had ordered that land be allocated in Beijing for a monastery. The Khan said all his followers must be relieved of their debts and duties. And he was granted a diploma with an imperial decree and a seal attached to it. Chang-chun, Journey to the West. So he built a monastery in which he spent the last days of his life. It is said that the Khan's advisor was furious. Yelu Chutsai wanted the almighty Khagan to provide tax exemptions to representatives of all religions, not just Taoists. Allegedly, he had already convinced Genghis Khan of this. Yelu Chutsai became disenchanted with the monk after finding him to be dishonest and ignorant. Nevertheless, Chang-chun was sent back with an honorary escort. He was able and of course wanted to preach his religion and also to spread influence and secure the support of such a great ruler. Chang-chun's return journey was much faster, but not without adventure. He reported that in the vicinity of Sairam there were 2-headed snakes around 1 meter long. After arriving in the city, the disciples wanted to take away the ashes of their brother, but the Taoist said something along these lines: "His soul is with us, let his body remain in the ground." In total, Chang-chun's trip lasted 3 years, just as he had said at the beginning of the trip. And here are a few oddities. He walked through conquered lands. For example, he passed not far from the recently destroyed Otrar. A lot of travelers passed through this place during the Mongol invasion. And they wrote about many disasters, but in Chang-chun's notes, there's no mention of destroyed cities or burnt lands, only a few sketches about the former places of the battle and the conquered peoples. In general, everything is described quite blissfully. No one is dissatisfied. Perhaps it's all due to censorship. If so, then what else has the monk left untold? What letter did Genghis Khan write? Why didn't the conqueror execute the monk? And why did Chang-chun go to Altai? Epilogue. Mysterious Prophecy. We parted in the spring, and now summer is here. Was there enough food and drink on the way? Were you well received? Have you found the right people? Are you quite healthy? I constantly think of you, the divine and immortal. I have not forgotten you, so do not forget me either. Genghis Khan. According to legend, Genghis Khan declared the lake sacred and forbade it to be polluted. For example, under pain of death, soldiers were forbidden to wash their clothes here. Lake Baikal is treated like a living being. These are the Altai-Sayan mountains. Genghis Khan's mother was born in these lands. That is why she strongly observed the traditions of shamanism. She instilled great respect for this area in Temujin, the future Genghis Khan. The Khan cultivated respect for the region and for local beliefs. He made many decisions in consultation with shamans, but did not tolerate insolence from them. For example, he had his sorcerer killed for abuse of his power, but he did not execute the wayward Taoist. Ill-wishers claimed that the monk bewitched the Khan. A few thoughts about shamans and Chang-chun. How did Taoism come about? It came from shamanism. So who did the Chinese monk meet in Altai? And why did he go there at all? In his own words, it went like this. Having driven to the southwest for about 3 days, we turned to the southeast, crossed a large mountain and arrived at the Altai Mountains. Having stopped for a while, we drove south again. Chang-chun, journey to the west. It turns out that they had made a detour on the way to Genghis Khan. First, they drove one way, then the other. For what reason? Genghis Khan's letter contains a question. Have you found the right people? It turns out he was looking for someone on the way back. Was he carrying out some kind of an order from the Khan? The tradition of knowledge that he studied in Taoism was rooted in Vedic knowledge, and this Vedic knowledge was preserved only among shamans. However, Chang-chun could have told Genghis Khan anything he wanted, just to be free of the dangerous ruler. And what exactly the Khan and the Taoist sage talked about is not known for certain. We are left with, let's say, only the official version of events. He knew the key to many things, but the interesting thing is that he didn't live much longer. Chang-chun died at the age of 79 in Beijing. According to legend, Genghis Khan asked him, "When will my earthly days end?" The monk replied, "We will die in 1 year." Perhaps in this way, Chang-chun decided to play it safe. Nothing is said about this episode in the notes either. Whatever happened, happened. Indeed, they both died in 1227. We don't know any details. Perhaps it's only a myth. They say that in ancient times, Lake Baikal was called Tengiz. Supposedly, the Khan was named in its honor. One of the legends has it that Genghis Khan was born here and his grave is also here. As one sage supposedly said to him, "To overcome death, after death, return to your origins." According to the secret history of the Mongols, Genghis Khan died after being injured when he fell from a horse while hunting. Was it foresight, an accident, or something else? They say that the monk died 3 days after the death of the Khan. On his last day, Chang-chun wrote a poem. Birth and death are the same as morning and evening. Ghostly bubbles appear and disappear while the water remains intact. Chang-chun.